LoveLore Library. Chapter 1325, Shock. It was so shocking and made everyone present tremble in fear. The power of a holy warrior. It's really terrifying. What about advanced holy warrior? Will it be enough to destroy the world? Wait. It was as if the crowd had suddenly realized something as their eyes turned to Feng Tianyu. Is this old guy a holy warrior? In other words, there was no such appreciation or respect because Zhong Fu was just afraid of Feng Tianyu and Gu Shi joining forces. Zhong Fu was actually a coward. However, Zhong Fu did not care what others were thinking right now. All he knew was that the group of people in front of him had hurt his beloved son. Feng Tianyu, initially, we could just forgive and forget, but you didn't appreciate it. Your daughter is rude and has hurt my son. Today I'll avenge my son. The anger within his eyes burned and became more and more intense. Not far away, Zhong Yi was still staring hard at Feng Ruqing as his hand firmly held Qin Fei's cold, small hand. Fei, you don't have to worry. This woman is so vicious. My father will never let her go. Qin Fei smiled weakly. Her smile that she forced seemed to contain endless grievance and sorrow. But she did not say another word. Zhong Yi became even more furious when he saw Fei trying to act strong. A murderous intent flashed in his eyes. A sudden gloom had blanketed the whole world. Feng Tianyu stood under the violent storm with one hand behind his back. He seemed determined as his cold eyes revealed disdain. Suddenly, an old voice with a horrifying aura slowly spoke. I'm just a little late, but the Divine Herbs Sect Assembly already looks uneventful. Jiu Yu raised his eyes in delight at the sound of the voice. His gaze fell on the old master in front of him. Jiu Yuan, however, was startled and looked at Jiu Ming with some concern. Initially, he wanted to say something, but he could not get a single word out of his mouth. Me for extra chapters. Deity's Gate Master Jiu Luo. The crowd could not help but inhale sharply. Deity's Gate Master had arrived. All the masters of the three forces had arrived. Gu Shi frowned as he looked at Jiu Luo and pulled Gu Yi behind him. His eyes were filled with alarm. Ha ha ha. Zhong Fu looked up to the sky and laughed, a laugh that was filled with joy. Gate Master Jiu, you've finally come. Well, Jiu Luo smiled faintly. A year ago, I felt the bottleneck. I was in closed-door cultivation, and I have not come out since. So, I have sent my son to this assembly. I'm late. Zhong Fu looked at Jiu Luo with shock in his eyes. Gate Master Jiu, did you? Luckily, I made a breakthrough to Advanced Holy Warrior tier a few days ago. And after the breakthrough, I came here to attend the assembly. But I didn't expect such chaos at this assembly, Advanced Holy Warrior. Zhong Fu was so jealous of him. He had gotten stuck on this bottleneck years ago and had never been able to reach this rank. Therefore, he had insisted on keeping Qin Fei after he knew about her breakthrough, wanting to know what method she had used to increase her strength. Who would have thought that out of the three major forces, Jiu Luo would be the first one to make a breakthrough to Advanced Holy Warrior tier? It seemed like from now on, Jiu Luo was already invincible, no one in Sangyu mainland would be his match anymore. How could Zhong Fu not be jealous of him? Chapter 1326, The Pot had an upset stomach. Zhong Fu pushed down the jealousy that was boiling in his chest. He smiled and said politely, Congratulations, Gate Master Jiu. Jiu Luo smiled faintly. Thank you. Sect Master is still young, and it probably won't take long for you to reach Advanced Holy Warrior tier. Indeed, Zhong Fu was much younger compared to Jiu Luo, who had reached the Golden Age. Zhong Fu's facial expression grew better. Jiao Luo had only made a breakthrough to advanced holy warrior tier at this old age, and he would definitely be able to reach this rank soon. He still had a long life ahead of him. There would always be other opportunities in the future. Jiao Luo's gaze slowly turned to Jiao Ming. He frowned as he asked indifferently, "Muir, what are you doing there? Our deity's gate is not over there, are you standing in the wrong place?" The man wearing a purple robe stood in the light breeze. His handsome face covered by a mask, making it hard to see his facial expression. However, his pair of cold and evil eyes were filled with sarcasm and mockery after hearing Jiao Luo's words. He sneered. "I'm not standing in the wrong place, deity's gate. What does that have to do with me?" His voice was as loud as thunder, shocking everyone's heart. Everyone looked at Jiao Ming in disbelief. Is he going to give up deity's gate for Feng Ruqing? Jiao Luo's face darkened, but he still managed to hold back all of his anger in front of Jiao Ming. Among the great powers in deity's gate, the only one he could be satisfied with was Jiao Ming, who had an outstanding ability unmatched by anyone. The only pity was the birthmark on his face, which made everyone regard him as unlucky, making it difficult for him to control deity's gate. Therefore, he had left deity's gate to find his own way, but the old master had never expected that Jiao Ming would be able to achieve what he had today. His other grandchildren, including even his son, were useless. They only knew to sit around idly and enjoy the fruits of others' work. Only Jiao Ming was fitted to be his successor. As for the birthmark, that was easy. He would find a way to get rid of it. Without the birthmark, no one would say that he is unlucky, and no one would see him as a demon again. Then, he could hand over deity's gate to him. "Ming'er, I know you have suffered a lot of things. Grandfather will handle it for you later. As long as you want to come back, I will not punish you for disobeying me in public today, me for extra chapters." Perhaps it was only Jiao Ming who could make him step back again and again. If it were any of his other grandsons, he would not be so tolerant like this. This time, Jiao Ming's heart might have softened a little, right? The cold smile on Jiao Ming's face grew bigger, and his cold gaze contained no emotions. He looked as calm as ever. Suddenly, a slender jade-like hand landed on his shoulder, easing his stiff shoulders. The young girl's fine hair brushing her face. She was so beautiful that no words could adequately describe her. Even Jiao Luo was stunned when he saw Feng Ruqing. He had never seen such an outstanding girl in his life. She was comfortingly beautiful, the kind of beauty that one could never get bored of even after looking at her for a long time. No wonder his grandson, who had never fallen in love with anyone before, was so fond of her. Even a hero would have a hard time resisting beauty. Too bad. He wanted an obedient and sensible child to be his heir, not this kind of person who was addicted to beauty and easily compelled. "So, you want to take the responsibility of Jiao Ming to decide?" The young girl smiled as she turned to Jiao Yu standing next to the old master. "Then, kill him first. He was the one who wanted to kill Jiao Ming back then. Since you claim to be in charge of him, kill the person who wanted to harm him first." Chapter 1327. The pot had an upset stomach too. The crowd was abruptly quiet. It was so quiet to the point that one could have heard a pin drop. Many of these forces present had expected Jiao Ming to speak out against the old master, but none of them thought that Feng Ruqing would step up and disrespect the old master. He was Jiao Ming's grandfather, and his strength as advanced holy warrior was enough to make people panic. Does Feng Ruqing think she can do whatever she wants just because she is the young lady of Fengyun Manor and has Gu Shi backing her up? She dared to be so arrogant and rude in front of the old master Jiao Luo, a man with high status. Insolent. Jiao Yu was furious, and he stared fiercely at Feng Ruqing. "Little girl, it's best to speak with evidence. You're just spewing nonsense like this. Be careful." You might cause trouble. Jiu Luo was not as furious as Jiu Yu was. He remained calm as he raised his hand to stop Jiu Yu. If you ever did something like this, I would naturally teach him a lesson for Minger, but he won't fight with his own family. Our deity's gate hates that kind of person. I believe in my son, and I believe in my grandson. Unfortunately, Minger was too young back then. He was easily influenced by the wicked person who made him thought that his own uncle was trying to kill him. He also knew about it and smiled faintly at Nalan Yen. I heard that when criminals were chasing my son, he was saved by Fengyun Manor Master, right? A cold and stern light flashed in Jiu Luo's eyes. Everyone present looked at each other, and they suddenly realized something. It turns out that back then, Master Jiu Ming was saved by Fengyun Manor Master. TSK, I never thought that a beautiful woman like Fengyun Manor Master would do such things. She probably already knew Master Jiu Ming's identity and also his power, so she had helped him. She not only made Master Jiu Ming feel grateful toward her but had also caused him to misunderstand his own uncle. Isn't that right? They are families, and Deity's Gate is very strict. How could they do something like killing their own family member? It looks like someone has spread false news to deceive Master Jiu Ming, me for extra chapters. Master Jiu Yu also said that Jiu Ming gave paramount to the young lady of Fengyun Manor. Maybe this is also one of Fengyun Manor Master's schemes. Paramount is not as powerful as the three major forces, but Paramount has Grandmaster Qing Xian. Who was Grandmaster Qing Xian? She was the herbal cuisine's Grandmaster in Paramount. She knew a lot of recipes for herbal cuisine. She had provided help to countless people and gained endless wealth and fame for Paramount. This Grandmaster named herself Qing Xian, so she must be a person who loved leisure and did not want to be disturbed. But she was willing to help Paramount. Perhaps she was already acquainted with Master Jiu Ming. Back then, Nalan Yen must have also saved Jiu Ming specifically for the sake of Grandmaster Qing Xian. Indeed. Perhaps those killers were sent by Nalan Yen, to make Jiu Ming felt grateful to her, and had used Jiu Ming to destroy Deity's Gate. Nalan Yen is really a wicked woman. The daughter is evil, and so is the mother. Zhong Yi sneered. One tries so hard to scheme against people, and the other likes to bully people. God is watching you, aren't you afraid of being struck by lightning? Boom. Before Zhong Yi could finish his words, lightning suddenly appeared, striking his head with a loud bang. The noisy hall was suddenly silent and quiet. Chapter 1328, The pot had an upset stomach. 3 buzz. All the people could see a huge pot was hovering in the air, covering the clouds. Yes, a huge pot. The pot was so huge it seemed like it could fit 5 people inside. And the pot could fly. Feng Ruqing held her forehead helplessly. She did not bring this pot with her when she came, thinking that it was too conspicuous and inconvenient to bring, and she could not fit it into the medium. Who knew that this pot somehow could find the way here on its own? It also went everywhere to eat anything as it wished, swallowed the lightning, and vomited it on Zhong Yi's head. Throw it up. The huge pot seemed to be in some discomfort. Its lid suddenly lifted. It spat out another bolt of lightning and struck Zhong Yi again. Zhong Yi had just regained his senses, but another bolt of lightning suddenly struck his head again. He was dizzy as if his mind was filled with a pile of paste and fainted again. Feng Ruqing was speechless. How many bolts of lightning did this thing swallow along the way? And its stomach is upset now. After all, lightning is a natural phenomenon that contains strong power. Perhaps the huge pot was just hungry and swallowed the bolts of lightning. It managed to hold on for a while, but could not handle the surge of power and spat the bolts of lightning out again. Jiu Luo frowned as he looked at the huge pot. He was quite interested in this huge pot, but he had to deal with Feng-Ruching first. Little girl, Minger likes you so much, but you and your mother are using him for your own benefits. I will not easily forgive you for what you have done to him. Zhou Luo's face became cold. Because if you do something wrong, you have to pay for it. Gu Shi took a few steps forward, blocking Feng-Ruching as well as the others. You can't touch them. When those two advanced holy warriors besieged the Mu family, Shaoqing's pot had settled them right immediately. Now Zhou Luo had just made a breakthrough. Gu Shi was only kindly reminding him. But some people did not understand the good intentions of others. Master Gu, if you try to stop me, then I won't go easy on you. Meanwhile, in the northern mainland, a stunning man in a white robe was standing calmly as if he was the only spot of light in this northern land. Me for extra chapters. Nan Xian, Si walked behind Nan Xian and asked, how's it going? I haven't found it yet. Nan Xian smiled faintly. His smile was something that had never been seen before he met Feng-Ruching. But I'm sure I'll find it soon, Sui smiled. The Divine Herbs Sect Assembly has probably already started, but I've told Gu Shi that we might arrive a little late. He will protect Qinger, and it shouldn't be a problem. It was possible that the man's eyes lit up a little when Feng-Ruching's name was mentioned. The faint smile on his lips suddenly faded. No one can hurt her. His Qinger was so powerful, and no one could hurt her. I don't know how Qinger is doing, and her child, Sui sighed. Nan Xian suddenly turned around. His figure was like the wind, appearing in front of Sui in a split second, scaring her into taking a few steps back. Did you just say? Child. A child. My child. Mine. Qinger is pregnant with my child. Nan Xian was overwhelmed with joy. His expressionless face finally revealed a happy smile. Sui was stunned for a moment. Have I not told you before? No. And your grandfather? Didn't he tell you either? No. Chapter 1329, Anxious to return. Sui was stunned. Qinger was pregnant, and none of them had even told Nan Xian about such a big thing. So, are we going to continue searching for it now? They had initially wanted to surprise Qinger, but had no one told Nan Xian about Qinger's pregnancy? No, Nan Xian raised his head. He was looking at the sky, not far away. There was light in his eyes and a glint that Sui had never seen before. I want to meet her now. Then, let's go. The old master and your second uncle are waiting. It might not be too late for us to rush to the Divine Herbs Sect Assembly now. They had no interest in attending the Divine Herbs Sect Assembly. They would not have gone to the assembly if Feng-Ruching was not there. Nan Xian's heart had already left to get to Feng-Ruching, so they must leave quickly. His figure turned into a flash of light as he rushed forward without answering Sui. He was so impatient to see her. The sky in the Divine Herbs sect was darkening as if it was in the early stages of a thunderstorm. Zhou Luo's energy shocked everyone. Violent winds surged from him like a tornado in the void. It was so loud that people around him trembled in fear. Everyone was startled and shocked. Feng-Ruching pulled Gui from Gu Shi's side through her back, raising her head and looked at Zhou Luo coldly. Her lips stretched into an eerie smile. Gui did not have difficulty breathing like the others because Feng-Ruching had blocked all the energy coming to her. She placed her hand under her chin, supporting her jaw and stared at Feng-Ruching obsessively. Shaoqing is so handsome and cooler than any man in the world. She wanted to marry Feng-Ruching. Unfortunately, Shaoqing had been seduced by that vixen. But that was fine because he would soon become her second aunt, and Xiao Qing would protect her for the rest of her life. It made Guiyi happy just thinking about it. Little Guogua, me for extra chapters. The young girl called softly, but it caused the huge pot in the sky to shake violently. Its stomach was obviously still in some kind of pain, but after seeing Feng Riching was being bullied like that, it became angry and instantly rushed down. These damn humans dared to bully its master in front of it. They were clearly provoking it. As a pot of principle, it should not turn a blind eye to such provocations. Jiu Luo's mind had always been more sensitive than others, and when he heard Feng Riching's voice, he felt that something was wrong. Therefore, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. As he pondered, the huge pot was already hovering above his head before it slammed down with a loud bang. The momentum was as fierce as a tiger, powerful enough to scare any man. Bang! Suddenly, Jiu Luo's whole head was dizzy. His eyes were dark, and the top of his head became swollen, almost fainting in front of everyone. Fortunately, he had regained his senses and quickly woke up. As soon as he turned his head, he saw that the huge pot had created a stormy wave, coming swiftly at him with a powerful force. At that moment, Jiu Luo's face changed dramatically. He never thought that this huge pot would obey Feng Riching. He was envious of this huge pot. Jiu Yu was stunned for quite a while before he shouted angrily, "Jiu Ming, you ungrateful kid, why did you give such a powerful pot to an outsider and not to our deity's gate? Are you still the old master's grandson? Don't you know how to respect the elder?" Chapter 1330, anxious to return to, but everything owned by the old master would be his soon. Jiu Ming is really ungrateful. He gave such a great divine object to a little girl. He should have brought it to deity's gate. Indeed, Jiu Yu thought that it was impossible for Feng Riching to tame such an intelligent pot. It must be Jiu Ming who had tamed the pot to impress her. Doesn't he see that this girl does not deserve such a good thing? Girl, aren't you afraid that you'll lose your life after using it? Jiu Ming looked at Jiu Yu mockingly. So you think, my little Qing'er doesn't have the capabilities to own the pot? Absolutely. Jiu Yu snorted. What kind of strength can a little girl who only clings on to men have? Isn't that funny? His daughter might not even be able to tame such a divine creature, let alone a little girl who was not even as good as deity's gate's disciple, right? Jiu Ming could clearly see what was in Jiu Yu's heart. He smirked. Since when did divine creatures care about their master's background? Jiu Ming. Jiu Yu's face changed dramatically. To him, all the good things in the world should only be owned by the three major forces, and none of the other forces had the ability to control them. This idea had been deeply rooted in them for a long time. But he had forgotten that Sangyu mainland had countless geniuses and countless talented people. If Tianya had not restrained them back then, many forces in this reclusive world would have gone around to kill people, steal others' treasures, and even exterminated people all over the world just to gain control of all the good creatures. The sarcasm in Jiu Ming's eyes was obvious. Your father has been beaten by the pot, do you think I have the strength to tame it? What Jiu Ming meant was that he did not have the strength to tame this pot, and among the people who were present, only Feng Riching had this kind of power. The pot had even smashed Jiu Luo's head, so how could anyone else have this kind of strength to tame it? Minger, seeing that Jiu Yu's face reflected discomfort, Jiu Yuan spoke despondently, stop arguing with your uncle. Your uncle is an elder, and he can't be wrong. One Feng Riching's eyes darkened. Little Guogua. As soon as this was said, the huge pot fiercely came forward. It did not even need another command from Feng Riching as it had already emitted a shocking wave and smashed Jiu Yuan. Jiu Yuan did not have time to react. Jiu Yu, on the other hand, was quick to react. He instantly dodged backward to avoid being smashed by the huge pot. In a flash, the huge pot dropped and smashed Zhou Yuan's head. Me for extra chapters. The soil under Zhou Yuan's feet sank in, and his whole body fell into a deep hole. You honor. Zhou Luo's eyes turned red. He turned his furious gaze to Zhou Ming. A monstrous rage burned in his eyes. He's your father. Ask this pot to stop right now. Zhou Luo panicked as he saw that the huge pot had turned its gaze back to Zhou Yu. In this life, he had never wanted his family members to kill each other or for his family to fall apart. Why? Ming'er was always so inconsiderate. How could he be so cruel to his own father and uncle? Those were his blood relatives. Little Pot, Feng Ruking's eyes darkened even more. That man talks too much, it's so annoying. I don't like him, and I don't want to reform him. The huge pot looked at Zhou Yu and then at Zhou Luo, but in the end, it thought that it was better to settle the old one first. Once he was settled with, the others would be easier to deal with. Zhong Fu was dumbstruck as he saw the huge pod rushing toward Zhou Yu. His body stiffened as he clenched his fists tightly, trying not to tremble. His eyes were filled with horror and panic. Chapter 1331, Anxious to return 3. Indeed, even Zhou Luo was unable to resist the attack from the huge pot, so what about him? Could he endure it? The pot had some kind of sadistic pleasure from watching Zhou Yuan suffer. It did not smash Zhou Yuan to death all at once but left him covered in blood, lying inside the huge hole. No one went to pull him up, and even his own son, Zhou Ming, only gave him a cold glance and made no move. Zhou Ming, Feng Ruqing looked at Zhou Ming's expression, her heart sinking slightly. No matter what, you still have Paramount and us. Well, Zhou Ming's face expressionless, as if he was recounting something. My mother's family background is not admirable, but Zhou Yuan liked her because she was beautiful. However, my mother has always been indifferent, and it took much time for Zhou Yuan to make her agree to marry him. She was a happy woman before marrying into Deity's Gate. Zhou Yuan obeyed her in everything, pampered her, indulged her, but since she entered Deity's Gate, she realized how cowardly her own husband in this family was. He was very filial to his parents and respectful to his brother, but he had allowed his wife to suffer grievances. Zhou Luo and his wife wanted him to marry someone with a reputable background, and the only firm choice Zhou Yuan has ever made was marrying my mother. If I had known this, I'd rather him give up on my mother back then than let her suffer from depression and die. One could tell what kind of life Zhou Yuan had in Deity's Gate from the way he spoke for Zhou Yu just now. He could be considered a good person who had no desire to compete with his brothers and would not disobey his father. But he was irresponsible toward his own family. He was just a coward in the eyes of his wife and children and was not qualified to be a husband or a father. Little Qing'er, do you know how many grievances my mother has suffered? The old lady troubled her, the old master looked down on her, and Zhou Yu, that beast, had harassed her. But no one believed her. Zhou Yuan has always trusted only his brother, and everyone said it was my mother who was the seducer, lusting after Zhou Yu. Ridiculous. Even her husband didn't take her side, it was all that public opinion that has driven her to death. Back then, Zhou Ming was young and he did not have any deep feelings about it. It was a servant who was taken in by his mother who had told him all this. Later, when Zhou Yu was hunting him, the servant was killed as she tried to protect him. Me for extra chapters. It was also that servant who had stalled Zhou Yu until Zhou Ming was found and saved by Nailan Yen. Vengeance. Of course, he had to take revenge. He had never slacked off in his training all these years, simply because he wanted to take revenge. What made these people still think that? He should have handed over his paramount to these murderers who killed his mother. Even Zhou Yuan was his sworn enemy, the one who had indirectly killed his mother. Not to mention the real murderer, Zhou Yu. Jiu Ming's voice was so clear that it echoed through the hall and caused an uproar again. Jiu Yu's eyes were frightened. You're lying. It was your mother who was unfaithful, it has nothing to do with me. Don't you slander me, I'm not that kind of person. Jiu Ming frowned as an endless evil aura emitted from his eyes. There was a rule back then that no one in the reclusive world was allowed to attack anyone from the secular world. Which included harming a woman. Not only did he want to take revenge, but he also wanted to clear his mother's name and not let her bear the reputation of being an unfaithful woman. And he also wanted to destroy Deity's Gate and make them publicly disgraced. Chapter 1332, An Unsavory Reputation. Somehow, after hearing this, a tinge of fear flashed in Jiu Yu's eyes, and he could not help but take a few steps backward. What are you doing? Jiu Ming smiled coldly as he raised his hand and then gently dropped it. Suddenly, the sound of hurried footsteps came from behind him. Everyone looked up and saw Paramount's guardian leading a group of women who came from nearby. These women looked like the commoners of the city as they were all dressed in ordinary clothes. However, the moment these women looked at Jiu Yu, the hatred in their eyes was so obvious that it was like a snake, wanting to devour a person. It's him. He was the one who had bullied me back then. I bore him a son and took the blame for half of my life. Why doesn't God take his life? When he was injured and went to the village, my father was kind enough to let him stay overnight, but he had bullied me and killed my father. I've looked for him for so many years, and finally, I've found him. Thanks to Master Jiu Ming for giving me a chance to meet this murderer again. He killed your father, and killed my husband. He tried to harass me when my husband came back and ran into him. This beast. He killed my husband. The quiet hall was filled with the sounds of crying. But the others were unable to say anything. Before Tianya made the rules, many evil people in the reclusive world had bullied the weak and robbed people. But they would not kill others just to get a woman. What kind of girls could they not get with their power and status? All the prettiest girls would be sent to them. Why did they have to do such a terrible thing? But how could this Master Jiu Yu of Deity's Gate be such a beast? Zhong Fu was also dumbfounded. He stared blankly at Jiu Yu as if he had never thought that someone would do such an evil thing. Compared to Jiu Yu, he actually felt that the mistake Gu Zhenyang had made back then was not inexcusable, but Gu Zhenyang had kidnapped Nan Xian's future mother-in-law, so he could not protect him. All of you are lying, me for extra chapters. Jiu Yu's face changed dramatically, especially when he saw that there was no single person around to speak up for him. Even Jiu Yuan was just staring at him silently, as if he had been dumbstruck by this news. I'm talking nonsense. A woman in the crowd sneered. I have even brought my child here. He is the evidence of the mistakes you've made back then. These people present are all great masters, and I trust you'll uphold justice for the folk women. Gu Shi looked at the group of women who had been bullied and turned his gaze back to Jiu Yu. He gritted his teeth in anger as his heart burned with a monstrous rage. Jiu Yu. Without waiting for Jiu Luo to argue anything else, Jiu Ming had already sent someone to bring in the woman's child. Jiu Luo glanced at the boy while the huge pot was resting, and his face suddenly stiffened. There was no need to prove anything because the boy's face was the perfect proof. His face was simply the same as Jiu Yu's when he was a child. And even though he was more demanding of his daughter-in-law, he would not have had any requirements for his son's concubine. If this woman had willingly gotten together with Jiu Yu back then, she would have been Jiu Yu's concubine. So, what Minger said is true. His son had done such a terrible thing. Chapter 1333, Jiu Luo's Protection. Jiu Luo's face darkened. He felt like his lifetime of fame was all ruined by this bastard son. But now, there were too many people present. No matter how much anger he had, he could not let it out. He stared at Jiu Yu and then turned his gaze to Jiu Ming. His tone became a bit gentler. Minger, there must be some misunderstanding about these matters. This girl willingly got together with your uncle back then. Your uncle had kicked her away after he found out about her slutty nature. As for this child, Jiu Luo paused. I will never let Deity's Gate's bloodline stay outside of our family. So, I will allow him to enter Deity's Gate. As a father, he was naturally protective of his sons, regardless of who was right or wrong. Moreover, for Deity's Gate's dignity, there was no way he would admit that it was Jiu Yu who was at fault. The woman paused. She subconsciously looked at Jiu Yu. Tears streamed down her face as she cried miserably. He violated me in the first place. Does a person without any status like me have no human rights? He's a beast. He's a beast. If no one gives me justice today, I would rather die here and curse him to eternal death. The little boy also jumped in front of the woman, and it was so heartbreaking to see them crying miserably. The woman's heart was always softer. All the women present were touched when they saw the woman crying so sadly. It's impossible for a woman to use her dignity to smear others, not to mention that it's not just one person blaming Jiu Yu. What's so great about being the young master of Deity's Gate? Why can't they respect women? Didn't the one who is called Tianya sign a contract with them back then? Do Deity's Gate think that no one will realize it, so they can simply ignore the rules? People like Jiu Yu are really just animals, scum. That old man was kind enough to take him in, but he had killed him and taken his daughter by force. He is such a typical ungrateful man. The Divine Herb sect and Tianshan Manor are here today, and they must uphold justice for these commoners. All of us have to follow the rules, but the three major forces that govern us can bully the weak and take the girl by force. And here they are, still denying it. Jiu Yu was stunned. As the young master of Deity's Gate, he was used to being treated as a high priest. And even if he had made a mistake, he could simply blame it on someone else. Me for extra chapters. But now, he had become the target of public criticism, something that he had never expected before. Initially, I didn't want to reveal this to people so early, Jiu Ming smiled faintly. But who has allowed you to keep nosing around my little Chinger's affairs? Chapter 1334, Jiu Luo's Protection 2. Jiu Ming glanced evilly at Jiu Yu and smiled. You're not a beauty. If you were as beautiful as little Chinger, I'd be able to indulge a little, but unfortunately, a cold wind whooshed through the assembly hall. Feng Riching turned sideways and saw that Feng Tianyu's eyes seemed alarmed as he stared at Jiu Ming coldly. He had long felt that this brat was lusting after his daughter. This time, that brat finally could not hide his real feelings anymore. Ha! There were still many things to deal with today. Otherwise, Feng Tianyu would have dragged this brat out to beat him up. Only then would he be able to vent his anger. Father, Feng Riching tugged at Feng Tianyu's sleeve. The anger on Feng Tianyu's face suddenly disappeared. He looked at Feng Riching gently. Chinger, what's wrong? Jiu Ming is gay. She deliberately lowered her voice. He likes the state preceptor. What? Feng Tianyu was stunned. So, this guy was not trying to take his daughter from him, but he was actually his daughter's rival. However, he still seemed skeptical. Why do you say that? The people in Paramount said that he's gay. Feng Riching was silent for a moment. But Jiu Ming does not admit it. He deliberately said such words in front of people just to cover up the fact that he's gay. Only then did Feng Tianyu gradually calm down. As for whether or not this brat would snatch the state preceptor from his daughter, that did not worry him. He's gay, not the state preceptor. And if the state preceptor is so easily being snatched away by a man, that would prove that he's not suitable for Qing'er. But that was fine because Feng Tianyu could keep Qing'er by his side forever. Even if his daughter never married, he would take care of her for the rest of her life. Thinking about it makes me a little happy. Suddenly, Feng Tianyu's gaze toward Jiu Ming became more pleasant. He felt sympathy for Jiu Ming as he thought about Jiu Ming's miserable childhood. He looked at him compassionately. Jiu Ming was speechless. Me for extra chapters. I'm sorry, I've heard everything you have just said. And what are you trying to imply with that look in your eyes? I don't need anyone's sympathy, thank you. All I need is a hug from my little Qing'er. Buzz. The huge pot had probably seen enough and swooped toward Jiu Luo once again. Feng Ruqing did not order the huge pot to do anything. She raised her hand as a sign to order the huge pot back to her side. The moment it approached Feng Ruqing, a layer of light suddenly covered the huge pot, and it became smaller and smaller before finally turning into the size of a bowl. It intimately and coquettishly surrounded Feng Ruqing and even rubbed itself against her face again and again. So, you can change your size. Feng Ruqing smiled and touched the pot. Why didn't you tell me earlier so that it would have been much easier for me to take you with me? It was like Fu Qin. He could be a teenager, and he could also become a child. Perhaps. This was an ability that all spirit creatures had. Master Gu, the reclusive world has rules. So, what should we do with a person like Zhou Yu? Feng Ruqing smiled. Her smile reached her eyes, but it was cold. It made Zhou Yu, who was standing in front of her, tremble with fear. Before this, Zhou Yu would not have remained silent when Feng Ruqing provoked him, but just as he wanted to open his mouth, he caught a glimpse of the pot that was looking at him. Yes. This pot had no eyes, but somehow, Zhou Yu always felt that it was staring at him eerily, and that feeling made his heart shudder. Chapter 1335, Jiu Luo's Protection 3, His Crime Must Be Punished. Gu Shi's face was expressionless, his voice cold and indifferent. Jiu Luo trembled and growled, Gu Shi, you, Jiu Luo, God watches over us. You didn't just sign a contract back then, you've made an oath to Tianya. Some people don't believe in oaths and break them. I'm sure no one knows better than you what will happen in the end. He is talking about you, not us. After all, Gu Shi was not even the chief manor back then. He only got this position after the previous chief manor was killed, so this matter naturally had nothing to do with him. Jiu Luo trembled. He's my son. What do you want me to do with him? Gu Shi glanced at Jiu Luo and laughed. I remember. One of the guardians of Deity's Gate once tried to cover up his disciples as well. After that. TSK, that was a tragic end. Otherwise, Zhong Fu wouldn't have punished Gu Zhenyang by locking him up for 3 years after discovering that he had messed up a kingdom. In Gu Shi's opinion, 3 years was too short. However, the mistake Gu Zhenyang made was not very serious, so he could only sentence him to 3 years. He had heard that among the oaths that Tianya had forced them to make back then was about the 3 major forces. He had commanded the 3 strongest forces in the reclusive world to be the enforcers to protect this world. If these forces tried to protect any person who had broken the rules, they would die without a proper burial. After all, there were too many people in the reclusive world. It was too hard to get them to take the oath one by one. Moreover, Tianya was also busy, and he could not manage it alone for so many years. So, he targeted the 3 major forces to handle this matter. No one found out about Zhou Yu's crime, so he did not receive any punishment. Zhong Fu punished Gu Zhenyang back then because he had made a big mess during the assembly. Moreover, Zhong Fu believed in this rule, and he did not want to harm himself for Gu Zhenyang. Human nature was inherently selfish. Zhong Fu could turn a blind eye when it was not connected to him. But he could not let them go once he knew that he would be dragged down with them. Fortunately, he had let that woman go. Otherwise, when Nan Xian appeared, he would not have taken only Gu Zhenyang away, even Zhong Fu would be dragged down then. Me for extra chapters. Then, he might end up like Gu Zhenyang, dead without a proper burial. Zhong Fu cleared his throat. Gate Master Zhou, what Gu Shi said is right, you, shut up. Jiao Luo and Gu Shi suddenly turned around, yelling angrily. Zhong Fu was startled and he seemed to be somewhat uncomfortable. You don't have any right to speak here. Your divine herbs sect isn't all that nice either. So much so even someone like Qin Feier can be taken in as your adoptive daughter. Gu Shi sneered, one corner of his mouth tugged up into a very sarcastic smile. Jiao Luo grew even more furious. He had helped Zhong Fu just now, but Zhong Fu was stabbing him in his back. How could he tolerate that? Zhong Fu ignored Gu Shi and turned to Jiao Luo. His face darkened. Gate Master Zhou, this is not a good idea. I'm trying to help you now. I don't want you to break the oath you have made back then just to protect Jiao Luo. Initially, Zhong Fu thought that Jiao Luo would be able to suppress these people. But he did not expect Jiao Luo to be bullied by a pot until he did not even have the strength to bear it anymore. To him, Jiao Luo was simply a paper tiger now. Thus, he became even more fearless toward Jiao Luo. Jiao Luo was so angry that he was about to explode. His eyes were red with rage. I won't punish my son even if I have to break the rules today. Chapter 1336, Jiao Luo's protection for Jiao Yu was his son. Indeed, he was filled with anger and hatred, but there was no way he would punish his own son. He did not believe in oaths. He would protect Jiao Yu even if he had to break the rules today. No one could stop him. As soon as Feng Ruqing raised her hand, the huge pot understood the signal and had flown up into the air with a buzz. Jiao Luo had just taken a step forward, but he was frightened and so, he took a few steps backward again. He was a little wary, but he still had to stand in front of Jiao Yu. What would happen to his dignity as deity's gate master if he let these people bully his son in front of him? Little girl, if you're capable, don't let the pot stand up for you. Jiao Luo sneered. Or are you afraid to fight and are just hiding behind a pot? Feng Ruqing smiled. I'm no good, so I can only let my little Guogua stand up for me. If you're competent, why don't you find a pot for yourself too, and we shall see which one is more powerful, mine or yours. Jiao Luo's lips twitched. If he was capable of finding such a pot, he would not have been so passive and probably would have already made a move against these people. He had only dared to whisper these to himself, not daring to take any action, precisely because of the threat from this pot. The pain. He could still feel it now. Even to such an extent that he could not help but hold his head hard when the pot attacked him. However, there's nothing wrong with not letting my pot stand up for me. Feng Ruqing stroked her chin and smiled faintly. Jiao Luo was subconsciously relieved. He was confident that no one among the people present would be his match, and the only thing he was scrupulous about was this unknown pot. The crowd was also well aware of this, and they could not help but sigh lightly. This girl, after all, is too young. She's also too arrogant. She would not even be able to hurt one strand of Jiao Luo's sweaty hair if she was arrogant enough not to use the huge pot. Qin Feier, who knew Feng Ruqing well, trembled violently after seeing the smile on Feng Ruqing's face. She clenched her fists tightly. Panic flashed in her eyes. Wu Yu, swish. Suddenly, a green-robed figure fell from the air and landed heavily behind Feng Ruqing as if it were a giant mountain, unshakable. Only Qin Feier among the crowd knew the man in front of her. Me for extra chapters. She trembled as panic permeated her heart. Feier, what's wrong with you? Zhong Yi saw Qin Feier's pale face, confused. Qin Feier was silent. Her pale face became completely bloodless, her body trembling uncontrollably. She did not answer Zhong Yi's words, the fear in her heart was enough to engulf her. The man in front of her was an advanced holy warrior who followed Jia Axian back then. Initially, she thought that the three major forces must have the ability to defeat Fengruqing. But, all she saw were two people who could only scream, not daring to move when their sons were almost beaten to death. Why? Why was God so often unfair to her? Why should someone like Fengruqing have people helping her everywhere that even the spirit creatures claimed her as their master? Before she met Fengruqing, she had been a kind person all her life and had never fought with anyone. But God had mistreated her. She was ignored and rejected by the man she loved, and even her only brother had left her. She had ended up like this because of these people. Chapter 1337, Jiu Luo's protection. She was kind and gentle before. It was these people who mocked her and had turned her into a vicious woman. Tears flowed down from the corners of Qin Feier's eyes as she laughed like a lunatic. But, no one was paying attention to her now. Everyone's gaze remained fixed on Fengruqing. The man in a green robe was not weaker than Jiu Luo. His breath was more stable, and he obviously had made a breakthrough since a long while ago. An advanced holy warrior. Impossible. Is there any other advanced holy warrior in Sangyu mainland? Even Jiu Luo has made a breakthrough only recently. How could the man have such strength? I don't believe it. Since when did we have so many advanced holy warriors? Jiu Luo is the only one among the three major forces who have reached that rank. Wu Ye's appearance was like a thunderbolt that exploded in everyone's mind. It also overturned their years of self-righteousness and made everyone understand that they were just a bunch of frogs in a well. These people thought that the three major forces were the strongest, but the person who appeared in front of them made them understand how ridiculous their actions had been over the years. What made them feel even more ridiculous was that this advanced holy warrior who had once made the crowd look up to him would only listen to a young girl's order. He doesn't have to die for now. The young girl was dressed in red. She smiled faintly as she said, "Leave him half dead." Jiu Luo had put Deity's Gate first above all else. And he had always pampered his son, Jiu Yu. Even though Jiu Yuan, his son, was lying half dead in the hole, he had not thought of saving Jiu Yuan's life. Because he only wanted to protect Jiu Yu first. The funny thing was, he had personally made a rule that the people in Deity's Gate must not kill each other, and must be respectful to the elders and love the young ones. Jiu Yuan was quite protective of his younger brother, but Jiu Ming's and his mother had suffered so much, and no one cared about them. Was it because Jiu Yuan was not his favorite son? Jiu Luo had even neglected Jiu Ming. Therefore, me for extra chapters. Fengruqing would not let him die. She wanted him to watch how Deity's Gate was destroyed. And how his least valued grandson annexed the entire Deity's Gate. Jiu Luo's eyes were bloodshot as he growled, "How dare you? I'm not alone here. Fengruqing, don't blame me for being rude if you dare attack me. I wasn't even planning to fight with a little girl like you for Jiu Ming. But you're so stubborn, so don't blame me." Fengruqing laughed out loud. "Alright, then I'll wait for it." Jiu Luo's eyes were burning with anger. "I also have a brother, and I've met him on my way here. He's here today. If you attack me, I'll get my brother to join me." The pot was fierce, but he still did not call out for anyone to help. But now, he was dealing with an advanced holy warrior. He was confident. The enemy was indeed more powerful than him, but after he combined his strength with his brother, it was enough for them to crush the enemy. "Oh, is your brother here too?" Enriching smiled faintly. "I didn't think you had a brother. Why didn't your brother come out and stand up for you when little Guoguo was beating you up?" Jiu Luo sighed. They had promised to help each other and had even come here together. But that pot was too fierce, and it was normal for his brother to be afraid to step up to help him. However, it was different now. There was no need to face the huge pot again. In front of him now was just a man. Chapter 1338, Jiu Luo's Protection 6. Therefore, he was quite confident. "Brother Xian, please come out and give me a hand." Enriching frowned. She subconsciously glanced around, and in a flash, she saw a figure cowering in the crowd. Oh, she knew that man. The man stiffened. He turned his head and met her eyes. "Damn you, Jiu Luo." This was his first time coming to this mainland, and this bastard Jiu Luo was the first person he had met here. Therefore, he had gone around with him to get to know Cangyu mainland, and Jiu Luo had even brought him here to watch a show. Who knew that this bastard would dare to betray him in public? If he had known that, he would never come here and would have quickly left this place before this bastard noticed him. That man, Brother Xian, turned his head sideways and looked at Jiu Luo. He seemed confused and bewildered. "You are," the smile on Jiu Luo's face suddenly froze as he cleared his throat in embarrassment. "Brother Xian, didn't we come here together as companions? You also said that the two of us have similar temperaments and personalities and should be brothers. How could you forget that? I really don't know you." The man was also anxious. "I'm not your brother Xian. I don't even have any relation with you. Why did you call me brother? It's as if we know each other well. You're going to get yourself killed. Don't drag me down. I am not ready to die. I don't want to be enslaved by that pot like those people." This pot had become stronger. It was actually able to enslave advanced holy warriors, which it had not been able to do before when they were back in Fangzhou mainland. "I should go. You two can continue chatting." He trembled in fear and turned around to escape. Suddenly, a young girl's laughing voice came from behind him. "Me for extra chapters. Emperor Xian Yuan, we've just met, but you already want to leave. Are you rushing to reincarnate?" "There's no need to rush. If you really want to go, I don't mind giving you a ride." The girl's fingers caressed the pot. Her voice was slightly cold. Emperor Xian Yuan stopped in his tracks. He subconsciously wiped the sweat from his forehead and slowly turned his head. He saw the pot had shrunk just now, was somehow growing larger again. The huge pot covered the sky, making it dark and gloomy, and had even blocked the sunlight above his head. He believed that if he dared to take a single step, this pot would smash him to death. This kind of pain he did not want to suffer for a second time. Maiden Feng, long time no see, he looked like an honest and innocent man, smiling and laughing, not as arrogant as he was when he first met her back then. "We were enemies in Fangzhou mainland, but I didn't expect that we are still enemies now." Enriching stroked her chin, smiling. Emperor Xian Yuan suddenly trembled and became furious. "Who said that? Maiden Feng and I are old friends. Who said we're enemies? Ridiculous. That person only wants to trouble me. Whoever tries to do that, I'll kill him first." Jiu Luo, that old bastard. He had caused this mess and tried to drag him down with him. What kind of brother was that? He was obviously trying to trap him. "So, you and Jiu Luo are brothers?" "No, I don't even know him." "Maiden Feng, you know my background well. How could I have befriended him?" Maybe he saw me as a stronger man and wanted me to help him. Huh, that's ridiculous. I don't even know who he is, and he wants me to help him deal with his enemy. Not even in my dreams. Chapter 1339. A sudden change. Jiao Luo's face turned pale. Emperor Xian's words were like a slap in his face, causing his face to turn slightly red, somewhat bashful. If there were a hole in the ground in front of him right now, he would not hesitate to jump into it. He thought his brother Xian would help him, but it turned out that Xian Wu and Feng Ruqing were old acquaintances. How ridiculous. Brother Xian, I trust you so much, and I didn't expect you to know her. It took him a moment to come back to his senses. He sneered. This time, Jiao Luo, admit defeat. I've never lost a battle in my entire life, but I didn't expect that in the end, that I would be defeated by a little girl, ha ha ha. He laughed wildly and insanely. Little girl, many people are willing to help you, God has been very kind to you. But, one should not be too arrogant. A snob like you will not have a good ending. He placed one hand behind his back and looked at Feng Ruqing coldly. His eyes held a distinct gleam of scorn. Feng Ruqing laughed. Being too arrogant doesn't end well either. For example, an arrogant person like you. Jiao Luo's eyes darkened as his energy surged out of him, pulling the trees and the surroundings from their roots. Jiao Luo was more bloodthirsty compared to coward Zhong Fu. Of course, Jiao Luo was fierce on the outside only. After all, he could only threaten Feng Ruqing, not daring to make any move. Feng Ruqing folded her arms across her chest and looked at Jiao Luo amusingly. Her provocative gaze completely pissed him off. Jiao Luo could not hold back anymore as violent wind surged out from his fists. He made a last-ditch attempt, instantly rushing toward Feng Ruqing. Wu Yu swiftly leaped in front of Feng Ruqing and held Jiao Luo's fist with his palm. A powerful force surged out from the two of them, like a storm, making everyone present tremble. Emperor Xian Wu watched the fight and glanced at Feng Ruqing cautiously. Feng Ruqing turned her head to him and their eyes met. His body suddenly stiffened as he became furious. Jiao Luo, you villain. You tried to frame me just now. I'll kill you today, bastard. His figure was like lightning, and in the blink of an eye, he was behind Jiao Luo and punched him hard. Me for extra chapters. Jiao Luo spurted out a mouthful of blood as his body flew forward and fell to the ground in a pile. The assembly hall was suddenly silent. No one dared to open their mouth, and the way they looked at Feng Ruqing was no longer the same as before. People who had insulted her as a beauty with no brain when she arrived just now were all trembling in fear. A beauty with no brain. Hee, do you think a dumb person can defeat two advanced holy warriors? These two advanced holy warriors. One of them served her as his master and was respectful, while the other was afraid of her, not even daring to meet her eyes. If such a girl was considered a dumb, what about the rest? Wu Yu saw that Jiao Luo had fallen to the ground, so he did not continue attacking him. He turned his gaze to Qin Feier, who was hiding behind the crowd. His face was slightly cold, expressionless. Qin Feier. His cold voice chilled to the bone. Even though the huge pot enslaved Wu Yu, it did not make him a puppet. Wu Yu still had his own mind, only his soul belonged to Feng Ruqing. No, it belonged to the huge pot. Chapter 1340. A sudden change. Wu Yu did not have much contact with Qin Feier before. He only knew that this woman had escaped from his master. As a servant of his master, murderous intent naturally emerged as he saw Qin Feier. His gaze was cold. Qin Feier took a few steps back. Her face turned pale, and her eyes were filled with panic. Zhong Yi subconsciously held Qin Feier's hand, as if he wanted to tell her that he would be by her side to protect her no matter what. As always. Enriching sneered as she glanced at Qin Feier coldly. Wu Yu, settle Jiu Luo first. We'll deal with Qin Feier later. How could she forget the pain that the Qin family had brought to Chainer? She had to make sure that the pain Chainer had suffered back then was returned 1,000 times over to Qin Feier. She wanted Chainer to be her drug primer. She had forced him to take a lot of bitter medicines and had used his blood to cure her disease. In that case, she would make Qin Feier live as a drug primer for the rest of her life. Death would be the only relief to her. Wu Yu stopped in his tracks. He turned his head to look at Jiu Luo. He suddenly leaped away and turned into a sharp sword before rushing toward Jiu Luo, who had just gotten up from the ground. With Jiu Luo's strength now, it was extremely difficult for him to deal with Wu Yu, let alone Emperor Xian Wu. The two of them pinned him down, one after another, not giving him any chance to resist. The crowd in the assembly hall was silent as they watched this scene. Jiu Luo, the master of Deity's Gate, was once a great warrior of this generation. But now, he was being oppressed until he had no power left to resist it. And all of this was because of a little girl. Me for extra chapters. All the people present were a little woozy. Their stance changed as they seemed to be more respectful toward Enriching. Jiu Luo collapsed and lay in a pool of blood. His breath grew a little heavier as his old face turned paler. He stared hard at the people in front of him with a resentful gaze. Those people. They had only watched the fight and did not help him. Even his son, whom he was desperately trying to protect, was merely hiding behind the crowd, not daring to stand up for him. Jiu Ming slowly walked toward Jiu Luo. He squatted down and smiled evilly. I've always been curious about one thing. Jiu Luo clenched his fist tightly, and his eyes were filled with hatred. He looked at Jiu Ming, wanting to curse out in anger, but it was as if there was no way to properly curse anymore. Why? No matter what happens, you are always on Jiu Yu's side. Forget about my mother and me, even Jiu Yuan. He's your son. When he died, you didn't even look at him, but when Jiu Yu's life was in danger, you fought almost to the death to protect him. Both were his son, but he treated them differently. Why? Jiu Luo stiffened and slowly closed his eyes. Things that had happened back then felt like it was happening in slow motion as they floated through his mind. He then smiled mockingly. Because Yuaner's mother was my servant. She tried to sleep with me using all the tactics she could. Initially, I had only wanted to spend one night with her, but I've never thought that she would get pregnant. How can a servant's child be compared to Yuer? That woman died early, so I had given Yuaner to my wife for adoption. I didn't want a child like him to be born. He was also my flesh and blood, but he still carried the bloodline from a woman of lower rank after all. Chapter 1341, A Sudden Change 3. These things were not secrets in Deity's Gate. Jiu Luo strictly ordered his men to stop spreading it, so even Jiu Yuan did not know that Deity's Gate lady was not his biological mother. No wonder Jiu Luo's wife was so biased. In this matter, Jiu Yuan's biological mother was indeed at fault. She should not have used such a trick to seduce a man. But Jiu Luo should have been blamed too. He knew that the servant was just a lower-rank woman, yet he was still tempted and slept with her, and later wanted to turn his back on her. Who knew that the servant was pregnant with Jiu Yuan, and he could only take her as a concubine because that child was Deity's Gate's heir? What was the difference between this situation and Jiu Yu's? One had bullied a woman, and the other refused to take responsibility after what he had done. Both were scums. Jiu Ming finally understood why Jiu Luo had always treated him differently. Jiu Luo had not treated Jiu Yuan harshly, but he simply never cared about his existence. Not being harsh on him was probably just for his reputation. He did not want any people to spread rumors about Deity's Gate Master being harsh on his own son. Jiu Ming sneered. Haven't you always wanted to know who Divine Physician Qing Xian of Paramount is? I can tell you right now. He leaned in close to Jiu Luo's ear, the evil smile on his face growing wider. Qing Xian. Feng Ruqing. Nan Xian. Do you understand what I'm saying? Suddenly, a strong wind blew in the hall. This wind was so loud that it blocked Jiu Ming's voice. Amongst the people present, only Jiu Luo could hear his words. Qing Xian. Feng Ruqing. Nan Xian. Why did Jiu Ming mention that name? What does Qing Xian have to do with Nan Xian of Tianshan Manor? Seeing that Jiu Luo did not understand, Jiu Ming smiled coldly and continued, Nan Xian is little Qinger's fiancée. So, do you understand? Boom. This sentence was like a thunderbolt from the clear sky, causing Jiu Luo's body to freeze. Me for extra chapters. After a few minutes of silence, he suddenly opened his mouth and spurted a mouthful of blood. The fresh blood was like rain, pouring down onto the ground. Jiu Luo's eyes widened as if he was very unhappy, and his body fell backward, gradually crashing into the ground. He stretched out his arms, trying to grab something, but in the end, he was unable to grab anything. Divine Physician Qing Xian. This was the person that Deity's Gate had ordered a lot of manpower to search for, but had never been able to find. It turned out that the person had been in front of them all along. No wonder. No wonder Jiu Ming wanted to give paramount to Feng Ruqing. He was trying to win over a divine physician who could prepare herbal dishes. The funny thing was that Deity's Gate had once mocked Feng Ruqing, and even he had always felt that a little girl did not deserve paramount. He had never expected her to be the divine physician Qing Xian who had caused a great stir in this mainland. No one knew what Jiu Ming had said to Jiu Luo. They only saw Jiu Luo being angry, spitting out blood, and dying. Zhong Fu was scared silly. Jiu Luo had died, so would it be his turn next? As expected, he saw Feng Ruqing turning to him. Her gaze was cold enough to make him shiver. Chapter 1342. A sudden change. For just when everyone thought that Feng Ruqing would settle scores with the Divine Herbs sect, a peal of loud laughter suddenly sounded. The voice was so familiar that it made everyone tremble. Ha ha ha, I'm back. Jiu Yute stared in the direction of the laughter incredulously. He had not anticipated surprise when he saw the pale figure that stood in front of them. Instead, he let out a terrified scream. Oh! My father is a zombie. Jiu Luo had become a zombie. This sudden change came too fast, so fast that the crowd did not have time to react. They only saw Jiu Luo already standing up in the middle of the meeting hall. His cold and stern gaze scanned the hall and was finally fixed upon Feng Ruqing. His fierce eyes lit with a murderous intent. I've finally met you again. The hatred made his old eyes all red. Strong energy surged from his body, making his robe and white hair flutter in the wild wind. Thousands of years ago, this bastard had seduced his fiancée and taken his sister away. Even his confidants and countless concubines had fallen under her spell and were so crazy about her. If the 9th emperor were a man, he might have been willing to bow down to him, but she was still a girl. Why should a girl be able to steal all his confidants? Before the 9th emperor appeared, he had been cherished and loved by all the ladies in this mainland. But when the 9th emperor appeared... Who was he? Nothing. How could he be happy with this? All these years, he had refused to reincarnate. He had wandered around the world and possessing dead bodies to find this damned bastard to take revenge. Fortunately, he had found her in Fangzhou mainland. And then... Her pot had killed him. He never thought that he would be able to see her again today after taking over this old man's body. Me for extra chapters. Ha ha ha. There was no way he was going to lose to this woman this time. Because of you, he stepped forward, walking toward Feng-Ruching. The energy around him grew stronger, like the waves of a storm. I have been humiliated. It was a humiliation that I could never forget. I, Hu Qing, had to possess countless dead bodies for 1,000 years to find you. Feng-Ruching was dumbfounded as she stared at the old man walking toward her. Qin Chen turned to Feng-Ruching. Qingqing, did you ever do anything to him? Why does he keep following you? In this situation, how could other people still not understand that someone must have possessed Jiu Luo? This kind of thing was possible. There was a record about possessing the body in the book, but it was hard to find someone with this kind of ability. After all, possessing a person's body was something against the law. Shao Qing, Gui pouted and snorted. He said that he has been looking for you for 1,000 years because you had humiliated him. Could it be that? You've been alive for 1,000 years. You've done something to him and denied it. He's so ugly, yet you're still interested in him. So, do you think he is better than me? Feng-Ruching's face darkened. No way, never did that to him. I didn't. I only like the state preceptor, and I haven't lived 1,000 years, so he must have mistaken me for someone else. That was true. This guy felt humiliated and angry. He was obviously being forced to sleep with someone. She would never have done such a thing. It had to be someone else. She was never that kind of person. It's you. Hu Qing pointed at Feng-Ruching angrily. His eyes were filled with unspeakable hatred. You've forgotten what you have done to me, but I will never forget it. I have been looking for you for thousands of years. I want revenge. It'll make you feel all the pain that I've suffered back then. Chapter 1343, A Sudden Change v. His future wife, his sister, his concubine, and his confidant. They had all left him. Hu Qing had an urge to cry as he reminisced about the miserable life he had suffered. Initially, if Hu Qing had said these words, there might have been people who would have sympathized with him. But unfortunately, he was inside Jiu Luo's body. Using this face to say such grievous words, no one would feel pity. It only made them feel nauseated, almost throwing up the rice they had eaten the night before. Insolent. Feng Tianyu was furious. My daughter is always right. Even if she did do something like that, it's not wrong. Feng-Ruching was speechless. Why did she feel that her father had made things even worse? Shao Qing, Gui cried pitifully like a 200-pound child. You'd rather have an old man than me. Feng-Ruching was stunned. First of all, I have not lived 1,000 years. He must have mistaken me for someone else. Secondly, he has possessed Jiu Luo's body. Who knows, maybe he's actually a cute little girl. Gui was speechless. For some reason, she wanted to cry even more after hearing Feng-Ruching's words. I haven't mistaken anyone. Hu Qing was even angrier as he pointed at Feng Tianyu and Nailan Yan. Both of them were with you back then, and I definitely have not mistaken them. And am not a little girl. Am not. I'm so charming, so handsome, so talented, and you are calling me a little girl. Ha! The energy and the wind around Hu Qing grew stronger with every step he took. Feng-Ruching was silent. This guy knew not only her, but also her father and mother. 1,000 years. Was it possibly something to do with the 9th emperor? Feng-Ruching's eyes narrowed as she communicated with Fu Qin in her mind. Fu Qin, do you recognize these two guys? Her mind was silent for a while. Do you think I, a little plant that only grew in the ground and couldn't even open my eyes, would have known him back then, me for extra chapters. We don't know anything about this man. Maybe Big Black knows him, but unfortunately Big Black isn't here. Big Black has been with the 9th Emperor longer than us. Fu Qin did not even know if the 9th Emperor was a man or a woman, and he was expected to know this man. Mother is overthinking it. Feng Ruqing was dumbfounded. She suddenly had the urge to pick up Fu Qin and hang him. Just as Feng Ruqing was lost in thought, Hu Qing was already in front of her. He pulled out a long sword fiercely and pointed it at her. I came here today to take your life. It's no use denying it because I've already found you. 1,000 years. Only God knew how much he had been tortured these 1,000 years. He would tremble angrily whenever he thought of the humiliation that he had suffered. What was worse was that those girls had often compared other men to her since they had met the 9th Emperor. Because of that. Countless people in the mainland wanted to kill her. Luckily, someone had finally taken care of that scourge. But, a bad thing never dies, and even after she was killed back then, she would still come back eventually. That was why he had studied so hard so that one day he could eliminate this bastard forever. Wait a minute. Hu Qing stopped abruptly and frowned. Somehow, he felt like he had forgotten something. Chapter 1344, A Sudden Change 6-0, I know. The old man. Did that girl call me an old man just now? It was like that one time when a middle-aged man called him father. At that moment, Hu Qing's face changed dramatically. He searched for something and found a storage pouch tied around his waist. He quickly looked around inside the pouch and took out a mirror. He was so shocked seeing his face in the mirror. His whole body trembled, and the mirror slipped from his hand, falling to the ground and shattering. He was stunned, unable to regain his senses. Who's the old man in the mirror? Why have I possessed an old man? He only sensed that someone was about to die, and that dying person's energy was not bad. Therefore, he had rushed over to possess him without even taking a look at the person's face. If he had possessed an old man, how was he going to hook up with the young girls in the future? Endless grief filled his eyes, making his energy even more fierce than before. He stared hard at Feng Ruqing and said, "It's all your fault. You're the one who has caused me to possess an old man. I'll never let you go." Feng Ruqing was confused. It was her fault. He was the one who had possessed that old man. Why did he not take a look first at whom he was going to possess? Little girl, there is no need to be sad. Feng Ruqing sighed. If you die one more time, you may be able to possess beauty. Hu Qing's eyes burned with rage. I'm not a little girl. I'll kill you. I will kill everyone related to you. None of them will be spared. Feng Tianyu and Nailan Yan had already picked out their swords and stood in front of Feng Ruqing. Qin Chen did not make any move, but his body was securely protecting Feng Ruqing behind him. Jiu Ming remained silent, but his eyes were filled with an evil light as he stared at Hu Qing coldly. There was not much to say about Wu Yu. The huge pot had enslaved him, so he naturally would only listen to the pot. As for Emperor Xian Wu, he squinted hard as if he was wondering if he should help Feng Ruqing, or take this opportunity to escape. What if I helped Feng Ruqing and failed to beat this guy? Me for extra chapters. But, if I don't help her, if she wins, my life will be more tragic, right? It seemed like both options were a bit risky. Hu Qing's aura was overwhelming everything in this world. No. Gu Shi's face suddenly changed, and his eyes were sunken. Gu Yi looked at Gu Shi, confused. Father, what's wrong? He's not an advanced holy warrior. An advanced holy warrior would not be this powerful. Others might not feel the difference, but at Gusher's level of strength, it was impossible not to notice it. He turned to Nalan Yen and the others, and all of them had the same look on their faces. It seemed that the people of Fengyun Manor had also noticed. After being possessed, Jiu Luo's strength was no longer at Holy Warrior tier. Now he had reached King Warrior tier. There was a vast difference between a King Warrior and a Holy Warrior. It was like heaven and the earth. Jia Axian was once a King Warrior. He had almost been able to destroy Tianshan Manor, which showed how terrifying a King Warrior was. Emperor Xian Wu was startled. He frowned for a moment before his eyes widened, and he shouted, "You are a King Warrior." King Warrior. It was an unattainable dream to ordinary people. These words were like a thunderbolt, startling everyone present, and they could not help but inhale sharply. Chapter 1345. Use my entire life to protect you. Hu Qing snorted and his brows lifted, seemingly enjoying the attention. Are you all trying to help this woman? He sneered as his gaze was somewhat indifferent. Emperor Xian Wu subconsciously took a few steps back. He stepped out only because he was afraid that Feng Ruqing would trouble him later. But now, this person was clearly more powerful than everyone else. He would only get himself killed if he made any move against him. However, Zhong Fu was one step faster than Emperor Xian Wu as he quickly took a few steps back and sneered. I don't know this little girl, but she has just attacked my son. So, she is my enemy now. Ha ha ha. Hu Qing laughed wildly. That's good. Great. You should be glad that you have chosen to make an enemy of her. Because of that, I will spare your life, and maybe I'll even use you again next time. It was only after hearing Hu Qing's words that Zhong Fu's heart completely calmed down, and he slowly exhaled the breath he was holding in. Qin Feier did not say anything. She looked at Feng Ruqing and smiled coldly. Initially, she thought that God was so kind to Feng Ruqing, but it turned out that Feng Ruqing would finally face the fate she deserved. One person was enough to destroy her. Father, mother, you take Chainer and leave first. Feng Ruqing's face darkened as she looked at the old man who was laughing in the storm. It's not safe here. What are you talking about? Feng Tianyu frowned, unhappy. Just because it's not safe, doesn't mean that we can leave you alone. Qinger, you don't need to persuade us. I'm already glad to have a good wife, you, and also Chainer in my life. I don't need anything else. I've already handed Lu Yun Kingdom to your uncle to manage. My kingdom will be safe even if I lose my life today. I don't have to worry anymore. The man's voice was cheerful but filled with determination. He once had said that he was not a good emperor. He would give up this world for his wife and daughter. He could never leave them again. Therefore, from the moment he handed over his kingdom to his brother, he only had these two family members left in his life. Me for extra chapters. If he could not reunite with his family and spend the rest of his life with his loved ones, what was the point of returning to Lu Yun Kingdom alive? Nalan Yen held Feng Tianyu's hands. She then looked at Feng Ruqing and smiled gently. Qinger, do you think that mother would leave you behind? Back then, I was forced to leave you, and that felt worse than death. If I have to abandon the person I love again, then I, Nalan Yen, would rather die here. She would never leave her family again. Lu Yun Kingdom. Zhong Fu stood a short distance away, frowning slightly. He had always felt that this kingdom name was familiar, as if he had heard it somewhere. But there was no time to think about it as Hu Qing was already rushing toward Feng Ruqing. His energy rose like a powerful storm. Gusher slowly stood up. He placed his hands behind his back and smiled faintly. Maiden Feng, today, you will owe me a favor. Feng Ruching was stunned. Her heart beat faster, and her breath grew heavier. If in the future, Gu Shi paused. If I'm no longer here, I hope that Maiden Feng will remember what I've done today. And I hope you can take care of Gu Yi for me. Chapter 1346, Use my entire life to protect you too. He knew that just by seeing the relationship between Feng Ruching and Gu Yi, she would never abandon Gu Yi. Otherwise, the day when Gu Yi had entered the Fangzhou mainland, she would not have unhesitatingly followed her. However, there were too many women by Feng Ruching's side. Indeed, Gu Shi had used this phrase to describe Feng Ruching. What if, one day, Feng Ruching left this place and after a long period of time, she forgot Yi? Therefore, as a father, Gu Shi was willing to use his all to highlight his daughter's existence. Hopefully, in the future, Feng Ruching would take care of his daughter for the rest of her life. Father. Gu Yi looked at Gu Shi at a loss, not understanding what he meant when he suddenly uttered such words. Xiaoqing naturally would not abandon her. Never. And father would also never leave. He will accompany her for the rest of her life. Gu Shi's figure flashed by as he rushed toward Hu Qing. Hu Qing saw a figure that was approaching like lightning. Indifference flitted in his eyes. He gently raised his hand, just like swatting a fly, he flung that figure aside. Thawed. The originally heroic, courageous, and unyielding Gu Shi seemed like a fly being swatted away, disappearing from everyone's sight. Gu Yi went silent. Father, could it be that you were frightened, and wanted to borrow this old, despicable man's hand to escape? Pfft. Hu Qing sneered. Overestimating himself. A holy warrior tear was just like a fly in his eyes. He could slap one to death with just a single slap. Just thinking about this, Hu Qing raised his chin and looked down at Feng Ruching. You will be next. If you have the ability, then continue to get your pot to hit me. Ha ha ha. I will see how you can smash me into a meat patty this time round. Feng Ruching raised her brows as she looked at Hu Qing. A glint of realization flashed in her eyes. Oh, back in Fangzhou mainland, the person who was smashed into a meat patty by Little Pot was you? Till date, since the huge pot followed her, it had only smashed one person to death. Therefore, Feng Ruching had such a deep impression. Hu Qing's face darkened. That incident was practically a dark history of his life. Humph. If it was not because that the person that I had possessed had too weak of a cultivation, I would not have had such an end. Also, this old bastard had the cultivation of an advanced holy warrior tier. After I possessed him, naturally I was able to break through to King Warrior. Wind gathered at Hu Qing's fist. The surrounding gale caused his robe to flap as he looked arrogant and domineering. I will see this time, who else would be able to help you? Rustle. Following the strong winds, Hu Qing had already leapt and landed before Feng Ruching. His fist was just about to hit her when Jiuming flashed over and blocked Hu Qing's fist with a bang. Strong energy was dispersed as the surrounding dust on the ground lifted. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of Jiuming's lips. His expression was not visible due to the mask covering his face. Empress Nalan, bring Xiaoqing and the rest away. Leave the things here for me to handle. Nalan Yan's heart jolted. Jiuming, you, a smile hung on the corner of Jiuming's lips. Back then, it was you who saved me. So, my life belongs to all of you. Since the day he knew Feng Ruching, his life was no longer his own. However, he would never say this to Feng Ruching's face. Now, with things as it was pretty good. There was no need to add to her burden. He only needed to use his life to protect her. That was enough. Chapter 1347. He was no longer the familiar Jiuming. Nailan Yen looked at Jiuming before looking at Feng Ruqing, who was beside her, and finally sighed helplessly. It was not possible for her to not see who Jiuming's actions were for. However, her Qing'er already had someone she had given her entire life to, and she could not accept any other people. Hu Qing struck again without any hesitation. Wind gathered at his fist, fierce and strong, and just like a hammer it smashed Jiuming. The smash made Jiuming spit a mouthful of blood. However, the man did not falter in his steps. He was like a huge mountain, blocking all the wind and rain for the person who stood behind him. Qin Fei raised her gaze as her angry eyes were like thorns piercing Feng Ruqing's back. Her gaze was resentful and indignant. Why? She could not understand. Why was it that there were so many people who were protecting her, up until this extent? It was fine if it were just the people from Fengyun Manor. After all, they were her biological parents. However, why was Gu Shi protecting her? Gu Yi was protecting her too, and even Master Jiuming from Paramount was doing the same. Was it really worth it to disregard their own life and death for such a woman? Qin Fei could not understand it, nor would she ever understand. Beneath the gale, Feng Ruqing had already stepped forward and walked toward Hu Qing to stand next to Jiuming. The wind made her sleeves flutter, yet it only amplified her incomparable elegance and unrivaled beauty. It was obviously dark, like the sky was covered in haze, but her red robe remained eye-catching. It was like the brightest color in this quiet assembly venue. She was so beautiful that she could bring a whole city to their knees, and she was so outstanding that she seemed to be able to dominate the entire world. Hu Qing admitted that this woman was extremely beautiful and that her beauty was otherworldly and dominating, yet not arrogant. She was not like a rose. If one had to use a word to describe her, the only suitable word would be cloud. Indeed, even Hu Qing could not understand why he felt like this woman was like the clouds, floating freely and not easily found if one was specifically searching for it. Making people look up to her but not really able to reach out to touch her. If only the Ninth Emperor had not been so eye-catching and not caused all the women in the world to go crazy over her. Perhaps, he would have admired and appreciated her. This woman was different from all the women he knew. Her beauty was too far out of reach to be tainted, and people were only allowed to watch it from afar. Me for extra chapters. It was almost sinful if a single stroke was left on her body. It was unforgivable. It was a pity. The relationship between the two of them would always be of that of enemies. Tell me, why did this woman not act like a proper woman, as she constantly flirts with other girls? And she even flirted with them to the point where they were emotionally touched and willing to leave him far behind, going after her without caring about the fact that they would have to climb thousands of mountains and cross 10,000 seas for her. The moment he thought about the humiliation he had received back then, Hu Qing's anger burned all over again. His eyes turned bloodshot as he manically rushed toward Feng Ruqing. Jiuming squinted. Little Qing'er, what kind of blasphemous thing did you do to him? Why did he go crazy the moment he sees you? Feng Ruqing shrugged. Perhaps he was a lady in the past and had admired me a lot. Later on, he found out that I was also a lady and thus has hated me because of love. She guessed that this was the only possibility. Otherwise, she really did not know exactly what the Ninth Emperor had done that had made this rascal so vengeful and angry, hating her to the point of wishing to rip her into 10,000 pieces. Just as Hu Qing was about to reach Feng Ruqing, Jiuming raised his hand once again to block his attack. The corner of his lips curled up into an evil arc. If you wish to hurt her, you will have to kill me first. Boom! At this moment, Jiuming's power once again spread out, like a cage covering the whole sky. Although cultivation was considered weaker than Hu Qing's, however, that monstrous strength he had stunned the crowd somehow. Chapter 1348. He was no longer the familiar Jiuming II, Advanced Holy Warrior tier. Master Jiuming was an Advanced Holy Warrior. Furthermore, his strength was obviously stronger than Jiu Luo's original strength, and even stronger than Feng Ruking's subordinate who was at Advanced Holy Warrior tier. He is already halfway in King Warrior tier. No one knew when Gu Shi had returned, but his hair was in a mess and his head was pretty dusty. He was dressed shabbily and was incredibly disheveled. Gu Yi turned her head to look at Gu Shi. "Father, didn't you run away? Why did you come back?" Gu Shi did not speak as his face darkened. Was he actually so cowardly and fearful, weak and useless in this little girl's heart, so pathetic a man that he would run away at the sight of trouble? "Manor Master Gu, did you just say that he already has halfway in King Warrior tier?" Feng Tianyu looked at Gu Shi as he asked. The corner of Gu Shi's lips curled up into a smile. In this world, there are quite a few people who are called kings and emperors. However, I say that there has not been a true king in this world. Only those who have reached the realm of King Warrior deserve to be called king. Although holy warriors were considered strong, there was a world of difference when they were compared to king warriors. Take Wu Yu and Jiu Luo as examples. With their kind of cultivation, they were surely unable to withstand so many attacks from Hu Qing. However, the strength that Jiuming had, this proved that he was already halfway in King Warrior tier. However, Jiuming had yet to stop breathing. In fact, it was starting to grow heavier. His whole being was obviously a little different as even the air surrounding him had turned a little gloomy. Snap! The mask that was originally covering his face instantly snapped into two by the gale that arose, showing off an incredibly handsome face. The crowd knew that Master Jiuming had always put on a mask when meeting people and had never shown his true face. Besides the people from Deity's Gate, no other people knew how he really looked. There were so many speculations of Master Jiuming's looks. Today, that handsome face that was comparable to a heavenly deity was like a sledgehammer, ruthlessly knocking into everyone's hearts. Nobody had ever thought that Master Jiuming would actually look so dashing. He was like flowers growing on both sides of the riverbanks, enchanting and incomparable. Me for extra chapters. However, these people snapped out of their shock very quickly as they looked at that lightning mark that was between the corner of Jiuming's eye and his brow. It felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured onto their hearts, leaving them completely cold. Under the gale, the man's purple robe fluttered as the lightning mark below his brow was covered in a faint purple light. It looked wicked and peculiar, like a ghost in the dark of the night. "That's not right," Gu Shi frowned hard as his face changed. Maiden Shao Qing, quickly stop him. He is using some kind of method to raise his cultivation. If he continues to raise his cultivation, I am afraid that there will be very serious sequelae. Without Gu Shi saying more, Feng Ruqing realized Jiuming's intent as she very quickly raised her hand. The huge pot received her order and immediately rushed over to Jiuming. The gale surrounded Jiuming and before the huge pot was able to approach Jiuming, it was caught up in the gale and was sent flying into the sky as it cried out in a pitiful wail like a strong knight never to return. Buzz! After that, under the sight of everyone, it disappeared. Feng Ruqing was left speechless. She helplessly face-palmed. She had overestimated her huge pot. What was she to do now? Jiuming slowly opened his eyes and he looked at Feng Ruqing with deep feelings that had turned cold and emotionless at this moment. The mark on his face had also expanded, covering half of the man's face. "What are you?" Hu Qing was shocked as he looked at Jiuming, feeling flustered. The man in purple raised his hand and with a clench of his fist, a purple sword appeared in his hand. Chapter 1349. He was no longer the familiar Jiuming III. With every step he took, Hu Qing's heart jolted. His eyes were filled with fear as he could not help but step backward. From the beginning to the end, Feng Ruking's gaze did not leave Jiu Ming. Not knowing why, she felt a baffling sense of panic when she saw the current Jiu Ming. Jiu Ming. Her voice trembled. Jiu Ming did not respond to her. It was as if he had not heard her. He took a small step forward and stopped before Hu Qing. Everyone present subconsciously stepped aside. The current Jiu Ming instilled more fear than Hu Qing did earlier. Hu Qing was just greatly angered and his anger had gotten the better of him. However, Jiu Ming was like a murderous deity that climbed out of hell, chilling and terrifying. Bastard! Hu Qing shrieked as he threw a punch at Jiu Ming. Jiu Ming still did not flinch this time, and the long sword in his hand struck the fist with a flash of light and hit Hu Qing with a boom, sending him flying. Hu Qing was covered in dust when he landed as he looked extremely disheveled. Hu Qing's eyes were full of shock. He did not know what method Jiu Ming had used to raise his cultivation, but he very clearly understood that he could no longer dream of killing Feng Ruqing easily today. Rather than wasting his time here, he should wait for the next time to seek her out. After all, he guessed that he could only use such great strength once. Thinking about this, Hu Qing gritted his teeth as he turned around and planned to leave. However, just as he was thinking about leaving, Jiu Ming had already caught up with him and descended from the air to the ground, stepping on Hu Qing's head. Hu Qing's head was firmly pinned to the ground as Jiu Ming raised his fist to ruthlessly smash down on Hu Qing's head. The ground opened up into a pit as his whole head was being pressed into the ground. He was in intense pain and was unable to breathe properly. Hu Qing was ready to cry. It was not easy for him to live again through possession. Was he going to die again without even living a full day in this new host? Although he was dissatisfied that he had possessed an old man, this old man had indeed a level of cultivation that was not too bad. It was really too difficult for another holy warrior to die on this mainland. He did not have the patience to slowly break through to a higher tier and simply wanted to possess someone with strong cultivation. In such an urgent situation, Hu Qing finally let out a piercing shriek as his body suddenly bounced back up and forcefully broke Jiu Ming's hold. He climbed back up looking extremely disheveled. Me for extra chapters. Ninth Emperor. Wait till I, Hu Qing, return the next time. I will definitely claim your bastardly life. Even if he had to leave looking disheveled and embarrassed, Hu Qing was not willing to admit defeat. Taking advantage of the fact that Jiu Ming had yet to catch up with him, he glared at Feng Ruqing and quickly rushed into the void, using all his energy to escape. In a blink of an eye, he had disappeared from everyone's sight. The crowd was a little dazed, perhaps they had never expected Hu Qing to have been so easily chased away. Just right before they could sigh in relief, Jiu Ming's cold gaze turned toward them. His gaze was expressionless, so chilling that it was shocking. Qing Qing. Feng Chen pulled Feng Ruqing to his side as his gaze was serious. He is not the Jiu Ming you knew. Feng Ruqing had not said a word because she, too, realized that Jiu Ming seemed to have become someone else. His eyes no longer reflected any compassion. Zhong Fu had long been stunned to his spot. His mind was still buzzing, replaying the final words Hu Qing had said before leaving. He said, Ninth Emperor. Who was the Ninth Emperor he was talking about? Subconsciously, Zhong Fu's eyes turned toward Feng Ruqing and his face paled. His body only managed to stop trembling when he clenched his fists tightly. Chapter 1350. He was no longer the familiar Jiu Ming however, he was no longer able to think too much. Jiu Ming casually waved and his sword rushed toward the people closest to him. And the person closest to him was Zhong Yi. Ah! A heart-wrenching voice shrieked. Zhong Yi's entire arm had been cut off as blood flowed freely. It was so painful that he almost lost consciousness. Zhong Fu's eyes turned red as he called out hoarsely. Zhong Yi was in so much pain that his face had turned white, but what was in more pain was his heart. Just now, he had constantly protected Qin Fei'er. When he saw Jiu Ming attacking him, he had originally wished to push Qin Fei'er aside to avoid her getting hurt. However, Qin Fei'er was faster than him as she let go of his hand and hid. When she saw Zhong Yi's gaze, Qin Fei'er also knew that her own actions were a little inappropriate. However, what if she was also wounded in the process if she had not done so? Luckily Zhong Yi was in so much pain that he could not speak and could not question Qin Fei'er. He clenched his jaw and gritted his teeth as sweat flowed from his forehead, dripping to the ground together with his blood. Naturally Feng Ruqing was not sympathetic to what had happened to the people from the Divine Herbs sect. The only person she was worried about in her heart was Jiu Ming. Seeing Jiu Ming's situation, she wanted to step forward. However, before she could even take 2 steps forward, she was held back by Feng Tianyu. Qing'er, this guy's situation is a little off. Don't simply take action first. I keep getting the feeling that he is unable to recognize us. Feng Ruqing gently pushed aside Feng Tianyu's hand. Imperial Father, Jiu Ming became like this because of me. I cannot leave him alone without a care. Hu Qing had come because of her. It was not related to Jiu Ming. If it were not for her, Jiu Ming also would not have forcefully raised his cultivation and become the way he was now. Suddenly a flash of light from the sword rushed over. It was so strong that it made it harder for them to breathe. The sky was dark as a flash of lightning and the sound of thunder roared above the venue. Shao Qing. Qing Qing. Qing'er. Everyone's expression changed drastically and was about to move forward to stop Feng Ruqing's actions. However, her footsteps were extraordinarily determined. She noticed that when Jiu Ming's mask dropped, all the people from the various forces were first stunned by his handsome looks, and then disgusted. It was because of the birthmark on his face. Me for extra chapters. Now that his birthmark had covered half of his face, besides disgust, those people also felt terrified. The world was disgusted by him, hated him, and feared him. If she felt the same, then would he not be alone in this world? If he did not abandon her and escaped, then she too would not abandon him. The sword suddenly appeared in Feng Ruqing's hand. Feng Ruqing used all her strength to gather spiritual qi at her abdomen, creating a protective circle to ensure that the child in her womb was safe. However, because of this, she was unable to create any other defenses around her and could only use her sword to block the sword light coming toward her. But, she was still unable to block it. The man's attack landed on her shoulder without any obstacles, staining her red robe with blood, making it look even brighter. She did not retreat, but rather continued walking toward Jiu Ming. Feng Tianyu wanted to stop her, but Neilan Yan stopped him. Tianyu, this is Qing'er's own decision. Furthermore, Jiu Ming had indeed become like that because of them. They had an undeniable responsibility. The next sword light was even stronger than the one before, and it brought along overflowing strength with its strike. Just as the sword light was about to reach Feng Ruqing, a figure in white robe flitted over, and in an instant, her body was swept up into a warm embrace. It was familiar and calming. Instantly, everyone felt assured. There was no need for her to be on guard against any internal or external problems. She peacefully lay in the man's embrace. State Preceptor, you are here. Chapter 1351, Feng Ruqing's misunderstanding deepened. Descending from the air, Nanxian's white robe was like a painting. His hand gently wrapped around the young maiden's waist, then he calmly and indifferently looked at the man who was standing nearby. Nanxian. Neilan Yan's heart was delighted. She had never anticipated Nanxian's arrival as much as she did now. This also allowed her to lower her guard. Suyi had also suddenly appeared beside Nailan Yen. Her white robe was fluttering, elegant like a chrysanthemum. In-law, although I do not know what is going on, you do not need to worry. Sienna will take good care of Qinger. This is his responsibility as a man. We do not need to be too bothered about other matters. If her son was not even able to protect his fiancée properly, then she would really be ashamed. Originally Hu Qing was chased away by Jiu Ming, and Zhong Fu's heart was already shuddering. However, Jiu Ming was still muddled. He did not target the Divine Herbs sect alone. He was ready to attack indiscriminately. As long as they were fast enough in hiding away, they would not necessarily lose their lives in this place. However, Nan Xian's figure was like a bucket of cold water poured onto his body, drenching him in a freezing coldness. He looked at Zhong Yi, who was covered in blood, and looked at Nan Xian, who was light like the wind and indifferent as the clouds, and thought of the words Hu Qing had said before he left. Zhong Fu slowly closed his eyes as his face was solemn. At this moment, he had suddenly aged 10 years. His entire person was a little desolate, his mouth opening and closing without a word coming out. Though there was fear and shock in Zhong Fu's heart, Qin Feier was just clenching her fists tightly. Despite the fact that it had been a while, the moment she saw Nan Xian, her heart still felt as if a thorn was pierced mercilessly into it. It was so painful she wished she was dead, and yet her hatred was peaking. However, she could not do a thing and could only look at Nan Xian holding on to another woman in his embrace. He was protecting her as if she was the entire world. Jiu Ming. Nan Xian stared at Jiu Ming indifferently. He did not release the young maiden in his embrace. His voice was clear like a crystal spring, and like the gentle wind that blew past so subtly. Me for extra chapters. Back then, you warned me not to hurt her, but the person who is hurting her is you. I don't care how many times you have helped her, neither do I care about your relationship with her. Anyone who hurts her, boom. At that moment, a storm of turbulence suddenly appeared. The man's ink-black hair fluttered, his white clothes was whiter than the snow, and his pair of cold eyes were chilling. I will not be merciful toward anyone who hurts her. If you are not sober, I will hit you until you are sober. The man opposite him paused. Perhaps it was just a moment of hesitation, but with this opportunity, Nan Xian had already leaped before him. He threw his fist forward as his gaze was cold and indifferent. Jiu Ming raised his hand to meet with Nan Xian's fist. With a rumble, there was an explosion upon impact. Those who were a little weaker were directly thrown out of the place. The place in the Divine Herbs sect was destroyed. The area in the middle was ruined, and at this moment, Jiu Ming and Nan Xian stood in the middle of the ruins. Nan Xian's gaze was cold as he broke through Jiu Ming's defense made of spiritual qi and landed a punch that did not contain any spiritual qi on Jiu Ming's face. That handsome face instantly turned red and swelled. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of his lips. Feng Ruqing squinted, quietly looking at the two men in front of her. Since Nan Xian broke through Jiu Ming's spiritual force, Jiu Ming wanted to gather his spiritual force again, but he was unable to do so. It was as if it had been suppressed by something, and he could only fight with Nan Xian using brute strength.